Okay. Haiti has been in the news a lot recently, given the recent resignation of Prime Minister Ariel Henry, and also because of reports of alleged gang activity. Today we have Kim Ives, a filmmaker who made another vision to tell us the true story of Haiti. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Asha. Glad to be with you.
Yeah, so I watched all three parts of Another Vision yesterday and today, and when I watched it, it gives me the complete mirror image, like opposite image of what the news is telling me. So,
Right.
what made you create this documentary, and what did you hope to get out of it when you created it?
Well, I have to say we did this in collaboration with Dan Cohen at Uncaptured
Yeah,
Media.
he's a good
And
friend of mine. Yeah, I
okay,
know
good.
him.
And yeah, I just don't want to take all the credit. But we were we drank the Kool-Aid in the beginning. We didn't check some of the information that we were getting because very early on, Jimmy Cherizier was being portrayed as a monster. And we had experience in Haiti over the years of a number of monsters who came along. The right wing would create a death squad leader or sorry about that, Esha. Yeah, I had to ask it's just a background for you guys. It's Wednesday afternoon. The paper has just come out, and so everybody's coming to the office. So there's always a lot of hubbub outside. I should have thought of that before setting up here in Haiti Liberty. So, so do you want to pose the question again, and then I'll answer again,
Yeah,
or I just pick it up?
pick it up.
Okay, I'll just pick it up. So, we early on drank the Kool-Aid as well. Haiti has had a number of uh, villains in its history. In the 1994 coup, there was a guy called Toto Constant, who was a death squad leader. They did kill, mutilate, terrorize the population. In the 2001 to 2004 coup, there was a guy called Guy Philippe who led a band of, they called them rebels, but they were basically counter-revolutionaries, more like Contras, to help overthrow Jean-Bertrand Aristide. So when people start to talk about barbecue, Jimmy Cherizier, that he's a bad guy, a terrorist, we say, oh, okay, here's the new Toto Constant, the new Guy Philippe. We just took it almost by reflex. But one day, my director sat me down and he said, I think we got this all wrong. You have to go down and meet this guy because I think he's the real deal. I think he's sincere. I think he's interesting. I did. This was in April of 2021. I came back to my director and I said, you were right. This guy is really interesting. And, we have to keep an eye and watch what he's doing. Fast forward a couple of months to Jovenel's assassination in July 7th, 2021. And Dan Cohen interviewed me in that period. And when I finished making the presentation about what we discovered about Cherizier and the situation as just a part of the larger discussion of Jovenel's assassination, he said, wow, Kim, this sounds really interesting. Can I go down with you and meet this guy and talk and so forth? I said, sure. And he said, listen, I can't guarantee I'm going to agree with you. I got to call it like I see it. I said, that's okay. I think you're going to agree. And he did. And hence the film began to really push back on the disinformation, the smear campaign that was being done against him. And this isn't surprising because the US flagged him already as a danger early on. And they always want to create the challenge to their hegemony as criminals. In 1915, when the US Marines invaded Haiti, they called the Kako guerrilla fighters bandits. And today, the new term is gangs. So all these people that are in the streets, that are fighting to get Ariel Henry out, are gangs. And Jimmy Cherizier is treated as the principal gang boss. But in fact, this is a revolutionary movement that he's been thinking about, working towards, striving for these many years, basically since 2020 is when he founded his coalition called the G9 Family and Ally Revolutionary Forces of the G9 Family and Allies. You mess with one, you mess with all. I know it's a long name. We just call them the G9 for short. And their purpose was not only to keep their neighborhood crime free, to keep kidnappers and extortionists and rapists and so forth from coming into their neighborhood, robbers, but also to carry out this revolution to change Haiti so there wasn't criminality, so people didn't need to be criminals, where people could eat, where people could have hospitals, schools, sanitation, roads, water, electricity, internet, etc. And so it's a very straightforward revolution. And he's being painted more and more as a monster. Now he's a cannibal, if people have seen stuff online. And all of this is basically to create the justification for the intervention that the US sees is going to be necessary to try to stop this revolution.
Well, today I just saw a news report where where the US and allies are holed up in a hotel in Jamaica. And one of the conditions to be part of the new government that the US has arranged is that they have to support the UN security mission into Haiti. And to me, that's just outrageous in the puppetry. Do you have any comments about that?
It's a perfect term. I'll probably borrow that from you. Outrageous in the puppetry, because they really have taken the most obvious script off the shelf, which is here are the conditions, and if you meet these conditions, we'll let you run your own country. No, this crew, everybody who agreed to go into this, they're toast. They're done. Politically, the people aren't going to touch them with a 10-foot pole. This thing is going to go nowhere. It's going to go over like a lead balloon with the Haitian people. And it's amazing really to watch how the empire has become so flat-footed, so completely maladroit in dealing with all its problems. It's like firemen rushing around with gasoline. And I mean, what are they thinking? So I mean, they're caught in a corner too, in a sense, because people in Haiti, like most of the planet, are just fed up with the poverty and the difficulties that they're having in life, and they want a new order. So yeah, this council that they're talking about, this is going to be a footnote in history. I'll be surprised if they even are able to get it set up.
Yeah, I was wondering if they were going to invite Juan Guaido there.
Right, I know. He went over well, didn't he?
Yeah. So one thing that was very clear in part 3 of your film is the poverty that most Westerners or many Easterners cannot imagine in Haiti. So you guys go through this area that of slums that have like running sewage or some kind of wastewater through the road, and people have to walk through the wastewater in order to get to their houses. And a
Right.
lot of them have very improvised tin roofs, like plastic bag roofs that won't protect them from the weather. And during this time, Jimmy Cherizier says we are going to go protest for food. Can you tell us a little bit more about the poverty and what kind of real, like how Jimmy Cherizier is helping his neighborhood or like in Port-au-Prince get like the basics like food and clean water?
Well, yes, as you saw, and I think it's important for your viewers to know that you really have to get to the third episode. The first two really set up the third, but the third is where, as they say in Creole, the buckle is buckled, where you really see what it's all about. And Cherizier really began his journey as just trying to better his neighborhood. It was a neighborhood betterment project called another vision for Lower Delma, which is his neighborhood. So that's where we borrowed the name of the film. So another vision was basically there to try to provide the services that the state was not providing to the people, to give them, whatever, clean drinking water, garbage removal, dance classes, a community center, etc. And gradually this grew and grew to become something that was sort of a security operation too, to keep out the bad elements who would come in and rob people sometime. There were many other, but he started to see we can't do this just ourselves. We have to do this in all the communities. So he started the initiative of calling around to other communities and saying, listen, let's get together, support each other, and we're going to have one, bettering our neighborhoods and protecting our neighborhoods, but also we have to change this government. And that is where he really started to become a threat. And so, as you can see in the film, they do garbage collection, they do water purification, they do a number of other services, but he's not an NGO. He's not going to, there's enough of those in Haiti. They have a lot of,
Way too many.
yes, way too many. It's called the Republic of NGOs. And they bring them down and they put tons of Band-Aids all over Haiti, a Band-Aid here, a Band-Aid there. But he's saying we have to cure the problem. We have to fix the wound. We have to stop the blood from flowing. And so that's really became his purpose. And that's where he's arrived today, as this revolution is in its early days, however long it goes.
So one thing I noticed is that in your, I think it was in part 1 and 2 of the film, almost every Western media source seems to borrow their anti-Jimmy Cherizier propaganda from this one NED affiliated NGO. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, yes, that would be the RNDDH, which is the National Network for the Defense of Human Rights, headed by a guy called Pierre Espérance. And again, we're in the learning curve. We don't say we saw this from the beginning. In 2019, I did a big piece for the Intercept on U.S. mercenaries who came down to try to steal money from a central bank. And I worked with Pierre Espérance, and he seemed okay. I knew his bad background, but I figured, well, maybe he's reformed, maybe he's better. But then I learned, that he was still up to no good. And the essence of his role has been, and this is true with, I could say, human rights generally, because just to historically do a little step back, the US used to have the good neighbor policy right under FDR, where we would find a local dictator, strongman, Codillo, general, whatever it was, Somoza, Stroessner, Batista, Duval, Trujillo, etc., in Latin America to monitor the neo-colonies and keep them in line more or less with an iron fist. And there was a lot of corruption. But these guys, caused a lot of problems too, and created a lot of Che Guevaras. And pretty soon, the U.S. said, we need a better arrangement. And that arrangement was needing to change too, because they couldn't just do it, especially after the Cold War ended, on the basis of, they're going to go communist. We're going to have a domino theory, a domino effect happening in the hemisphere. So what they came up with was human rights. Human rights is going to be our, standard that we fly under, and we're the defenders of human rights. Never mind that, we're the main prop up of Israel or Saudi Arabia or whatever terrible case we can cite. But human rights groups now began to flourish, began to spread like mushrooms. And it was a good business too, because you get money, State Department, Soros Foundation, et cetera, et cetera. So the one of these human rights groups that leads the pack of them in Haiti, of the Haitian ones, is this RNDDH. And it is a complete tool, a complete political party, we could say, which goes out and basically smears the enemies of the empire and makes some money at the same time. So RNDDH is very much featured in the film, and its role in sliming and smearing Cherizier is, I think, made clear. You'll let me know if it was made clear.
Very clear.
Okay, so anyway, watch the film for that, to just see the anecdote of how the human rights industry works in Haiti.
Yeah, Human Rights Watch does that too, where they're good on
Right.
one issue, like Israel or Palestine, but then they but then they like push State Department to give themselves credibility, and then they just push State Department propaganda in every other issue possible.
Yeah, it's like the old Trotsky adage. I'm not a Trotskyist, but he did have a good line which said, he was talking about the New York Times, and he was saying, they tell you the truth some of the time, but that's so they can slip you the lie when it's really important,
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about the New York Times. So sometimes
Right.
they
Also, the New York
accidentally
Times. Yeah, it's the whole thing.
they accidentally tell the truth once in a while, but
Right.
then you have
Yeah.
that's what I call truth slips. But
Yeah.
then they quickly recover from that. So, oh, so one thing you do touch is the assassination of Jovenel Moise.
Moise.
So I'm sorry, did I mispronounce that?
Moise.
Moise. So, it seems weird that the assassination of the leader of the country is kind of still unsolved. What is going on there?
Well, it's like the assassination of John F. Kennedy still being unsolved, isn't
Well,
it?
Olaf Palme, but that was because it was the CIA.
Yes, right. Well, it's the same thing. The U.S. almost 99.99999% certainly was involved in it, or at the very least had foreknowledge of it, because there's no way you can have 30 Colombians on their cell phones hanging out in the country for 3 months talking about this operation they're going to do, and the U.S. Embassy didn't know about it. It's the fourth largest U.S. embassy in the world. You look at it, it looks like a porcupine. It's just bristling with antennae. And so they had to know what was happening with this. And there is very good evidence and indications that people like Pierre Esperance were involved in it, and quite a few others. So there we have this plot, this conspiracy to overthrow the president. And now who's going to take charge of it? Well, the very people who were behind it, and that's the US. They've taken a lot of the people that they've captured so far, who are low in the ladder of this thing. We don't have any idea really yet of who the intellectual authors and who the money baskets, money pots were behind this. And we know, however, through investigators in Dominican Republic, that something on the order of $21 million went through Dominican banks to pay for this operation. So it was very costly. And I mean, for God's sakes, the US government knows every electron that's moving. They also know every dollar that's moving. So they know where it came from. So essentially, this will remain a mystery as long as they're doing the investigation. Hopefully one day soon, Haiti can have its own independent sovereign government, which can look into this, investigate it, and we can find out who really was behind the assassination of Jovenel Moise.
Why did they assassinate him? He seemed kind of like to be in the middle of the road, not somebody who really rocks the boat. So, do you have any theories on?
As my mentor used to say, that's the most dangerous place, in the middle of the road. You got to go either the left side or the right side, but in the middle, you're a very dangerous spot. And that sure turned out to be true. I mean, Jovenel Moise came in as a kind of he was no politician. He had never really been involved in politics. He was a businessman. He was sort of plucked out of the business world because he'd been looking for a way to improve his area. He was from the north of Haiti, an area, Cape Haitian, largely agricultural up there. And, he basically was a peasant. He looked like a peasant. He wore the kind of ill-fitting suits and had a sort of skinny neck and a big head. And, he was an archetypal peasant stock person. And so he really did have a vision, it turns out, or a desire to improve the lives of the people he grew up with and those. So he started to make projects and plans for electrification and for paving roads and for building dams and making canals and so on and so forth. But unfortunately for him, the US government was in a war with Venezuela. So the money that had been used to do a lot of projects in the previous term of his predecessor, Michel Martelly, dried up because when Trump came into office at the same time that Jovenel did, he immediately slapped deeper on Venezuela,
Yeah,
which essentially
with the Citgo, they basically literally took over Venezuela's gas production and gave it to like the opposition party for their own private
right.
use.
That was part of it. Yeah, stealing Citgo from them. But also there was the fact that the banks, and we have to remember here in the United States, we live under not strong military leaders, a dictatorship or a Codillo. We live under the dictatorship of the banks. And so what the central bank did is they said, you can no longer transfer money. They did what they tried to do to Russia, but it didn't, where it didn't work, of course. But in the case of Venezuela, it made it almost impossible for Venezuela and Haiti to be sending money back and forth between each other for this Petrocaribe deal, which people can read about in Haiti Liberté. If you go to the site, put in Petrocaribe. WikiLeaks gave Haiti Liberté the 2,000 documents relating to Haiti, and we did about 60 articles on all manner of things. But the very first one, was on the Petrocaribe deal and how the US tried to torpedo it. So they weren't able to torpedo it in 2017, or excuse me, in 2006 and 7 and 8 when it was launched. That was under Obama, but they did succeed in doing it under Trump, and that was through doing the bank sanctions. Anyway, what that meant is that suddenly this pot of gold of petrol revenues that Jovenel thought he would have, he didn't have. And so he had to turn to the bourgeoisie of Haiti and say, listen, I've made all these promises. I don't want to look bad. Give me some money so I can help this with the people. It's in your interests and my interests and all our interests and the Haitian people's interests. And they told him, take a hike. You're getting out of there. You got the wrong idea. We don't work for you. You work for us. And there began a battle between Jovenel Moïse and the local oligarchy, the local bourgeoisie, which are just the hand at the end of the arm of the US, as we know. So he was being useful on some levels because, he was a very pragmatic guy, not ideologically formed. He didn't really have any political formation. I'm not saying he wasn't smart, but for instance, when the US came, Trump again came and said, listen, you got to attack Venezuela with us. And so they put him as kind of the hood ornament on the tank that they were driving at Venezuela. And so Haiti, which had always been defending Venezuela in the OAS and in general, suddenly flipped and became part of the anti-Venezuela, not recognizing the election of Maduro, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the Jovenel that we here at Haiti Liberté were denouncing, and we were part of the campaign against him, which included the bourgeoisie. But it really wasn't until after his assassination, as we looked at it again, and this is just, due to the rush of history, sometimes it's later that you see that we saw he actually was trying to do quite a few good things, and that actually we sort of played a role in part of the bourgeoisie's campaign against him. So anyway, this was generally true for most of Haiti, and in the countryside, he was very popular. In Cape Haitian, in Jeremy, in the Central Plateau of Haiti, where he'd done a lot of projects and was undertaking things and taking initiatives. The people really liked him. We kind of discovered later. It was more in Port-au-Prince, where the power is, where the bourgeoisie sits, and where a lot of money was spent to make these giant demonstrations against him, demonstrations we were too happy to publicize and say, yeah, Jovenel's got to go. But in the end, and he could have been better. But he started to really switch and started to see in 2021, 2020, said, well, maybe I took the wrong turn. And he started to put feelers out to Venezuela again and say, let's patch things up. And to Russia, he received the Russian ambassador. So he made a trip to Turkey, where apparently he was trying to talk more to the Russians. And so all of this was a danger sign. And, like Henry Kissinger said, being a friend of the United States can be fatal. It turned out to be fatal for him.
Well, yeah. So it sounds like what happens to a lot of people who bow to the US, like who start to have their own thinking. Like right now, they're kind of doing that to Viktor Orban in Hungary, where before he used to be a complete NED puppet, but now he's like, no, we're going to be working with China because I want to be right by the Hungarian people. And now they're just like, oh, he's a fascist. And it's like, you weren't bothered by his fascism for the past 30 years. What's different now?
Yeah, right. Or Manuel Noriega. Look at, he was working with them. Yeah, or Torrijos, I mean, Torrijos, they killed, Manuel Noriega, they just threw him in jail for the rest of his life. But
yeah, no, I completely agree. Actually, this is the 25th year of the Panama invasion. I don't know what to call it.
That's correct.
So we should have,
the Panama Deception, as the great
I
film
love that
said.
movie.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna do a special about that this year towards December. So that makes a lot of sense. So now there are in your movie itself, you cover that there are some violent gangs that come and shoot out everyone, and there's a lot of violence in these neighborhoods. So where do these and often these violent gangs are cooperating with the police and so on. So how did they start?
Well, essentially, under the Duvalier dictatorship from 1957 to 1986, you had one big gang called the Tonton Macoute, the Volontaires de la Sécurité Nationale, Volunteers for National Security. And this was like a militia that Duvalier formed to guard his power. They were the eyes, ears, and fists of the regime, and they were very brutal. Graham Greene wrote an amazing novel sort of describing them called The Comedians. I highly suggest it to people, for people to read or to watch the movie with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor in the lead roles by the same name, The Comedians. And in 1986 was when the US was shifting from using dictators to doing demonstration elections. And then the enforcers of the New World Order that was emerging was the United Nations instead of the army or the militias. So Duvalier was one of the first ones to sweep away because he wasn't being very effective anymore. And plus the fact his corruption and other things were a hindrance, an encumbrance.
I just once saw this 60 Minutes clip from sometime in the 1970s where he literally agreed to sell, some also did this, but Duvalier too, where he agreed to sell Haitian plasma to some US company.
Hemo Caribbean, run by his chief sort of enforcer, a guy called Luckner Cambron. So it was a very seedy period of life, but they kind of brought him out and they thought, well, bring in, somebody better, a technocrat in the name of Marc Bazin. But that's a whole other chapter we'll go into. In any case, when they broke up the Makuts, these guys who had gone through their life intimidating and, just basically stealing money, walking into a store and taking what they want and walking out, they started to go on rampages in, neighborhoods which were newly liberated from the dictatorship. And the people started to make what's called vigilance brigades, which began as sort of pots and pans. They'd start to bang them when the bad guys were around, and some guys had machetes and so forth. And then gradually, those vigilance brigades were hired by some of the bourgeoisie to guard their warehouse or their factory or their plantation. And they began to say, okay, you need some guns, and, arm them and give them a little more power and strength. And they began to get more powerful, especially in the neighborhoods which were very crime ridden. And that's how they grew. And some of these gangs became criminal gangs. And they said, okay, we'll make business doing crimes. Ransoms are a good thing. And then especially the example was set in 2004 when U.S. SEAL team came and kidnapped Aristide from his house. And they said, oh, so kidnapping's on the table now. Let's do that. But there were a number of them who remained vigilance brigades who said, no, we don't want crime. We want everything in order. We want people to live peaceably, go about their life. And so that was the Jimmy Cherizier group, whereas the other criminal gangs were more mercenaries, were people who would do anything for money. And that was really the trouble we saw in Haiti over the past 5 years, was the battle between these vigilance brigades led by Cherizier's G9 coalition against the criminal gang coalition called the GPEP. But, as Esha, every revolution has a kind of a dress rehearsal, a tryout, right? Russian Revolution, we had 1905. Cuban Revolution had the Moncada. But in this case, it was the autumn of 2022. And the puppet of the U.S. Finally followed his orders and doubled the price of gas on the population, cut the fuel subsidies. Yeah, Ariel Henry. And Cherizier, the whole country blew up. Everybody went out in the streets. Barricades went up everywhere. And the G9 said, yeah, we got to this is our perfect occasion. We're going to lead the way. And the fuel terminal, the biggest fuel terminal, there were 3 in Port-au-Prince, but the biggest one was Vareux. They blockaded it. They put blockade around so trucks couldn't go in and out. They said, okay, if you're going to make it impossible for people to buy gas, the bourgeoisie's not going to get gas either. We're going to shut it down. We're going to shut you down. You got to resign, Ariel Henry, before we open this up. Well, what did Ariel Henry do? He went to the criminal gangs and he gave them money to launch a war on the G9. And so Cherizier, who was confronting the police and trying to force Ariel out, ended up in a battle with the JPEP groups, which, just all you need is money. And they gave them money, they gave them guns, they gave them ammunition. And pretty soon it got to the point where, with the international community saying, oh, it's the G9 is causing all the problems in the country because they blocked off the Vareux plant. Finally, they met and they said, we better retreat because we're getting killed here. And the people didn't rise up at that time. So that was kind of a lesson to him, and what they decided. And I just say him for shorthand. This is a group. They really decide things by consensus and discussion. I've listened in on some of these conversations, not too closely, but it's very animated, and they're debating how to go forward. What they decided, they said, listen, we're not going to be able to overthrow Henri and get this revolution we want if we're just doing it ourselves. We have to work. We have to make peace with these criminal gangs because it's in their interest too. They don't have to resort to crime anymore. They can redeem themselves and maybe not be so hated by the people. So that's when he launched the idea of this Vivre Ensemble, live together coalition, which has this disparate. So it's really the wedding of opposites. And Haitian history is full of this. Dessalines and Pétion, the founding fathers of Haiti, were bitter enemies, but they met in May of 1803, and they said, okay, we got to stop fighting together so we can get the French out. And they did, and they won the war, the first independent nation of Latin America. Mao Zedong had to do the same thing with Chiang Kai-shek in the early 40s to get the Japanese out of China. So sometimes you have these weddings. Jimmy Cherizier calls it, I have to make a deal with the devil, but they're little devils to get rid of the bigger devil. So that's where we are.
Okay, so that was very interesting to me. Another question is that Ariel Henry went to Kenya to get Kenyan quote unquote peace keeping troops or whatever. And then
War making.
What?
War making troops, yes.
War making troops, yeah. Yeah, it's a complete opposite of peacekeeping, but it's funny how it's like an Orwellian. They call it peacekeeping, but you're right, it's war making.
It's like they're going to save the environment with the things to rape the environment, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But then he tried to come back, but the airport was blockaded. Can you explain what happened there? And he had to reroute back to New Jersey and then try to go back through Puerto Rico.
Right. So essentially, there was a big movement in the months of December, January, and February December and January to get Ariel Henry out by February 7th, because Ariel Henry had said he was going to step down on that date because he thought he would have made the elections and so forth, and he hadn't. So a lot of the political class and the people, everybody in Haiti, a lot of things get fixed on a certain date. They become symbolic or sort of red lines. So this February 7th, which is the traditional day, that was the day Duvalier fled in 1986. So since then, it's always been the day where you have a change of power, change of regime. So there was a big movement, and there was a guy who had led the 2004 coup, the military wing of it, in 2004, a guy called Guy Philippe, who had been in jail in the United States for supposed money laundering. He contested. He said, I didn't do any drug trafficking or any money laundering. And he might be true. You know, we've looked at it. It's very flimsy evidence against him. And it looks like it was a political prosecution. Anyway, he got back. He was madder than a hornet and really anti-imperialist, but to some extent, maybe from his personal betrayal, because he worked with the US to help overthrow Aristide in 2004, but they kicked him to the curb and ended up throwing him in jail. And so he wasn't happy about any of that. So he came back after serving his 7 years in jail in November 30th, to be exact, into Haiti. And he started to go on the YouTube and on radios and on the back of giant sound trucks in different towns and making very eloquent, articulate, compelling speeches. He's a very good speaker. He's very charismatic. He's got a big, beautiful smile, and so he really enchanted the people with his vision of getting rid of Ariel Henry. But he said he's going to do it peacefully. It was going to be through civil disobedience. They were going to do it, and so the day built, and he finally showed up in Port-au-Prince on February 5th or 6th, and he popped up in a park, and people kind of came out and shaking his hand, and some guy was very clumsily filming it, and it was a disaster. Anyway, he disappeared again, and then the next day on February 7th, instead of Ariel being ousted, he machine gunned 5 guys who were part of a thing called BASAP, the Surveillance Brigade for Protected Airs, which is essentially park rangers, which had grown into a large militia, and they were sort of behind with Guy Philippe, or with the guy who works with Guy Philippe. So Guy Philippe, instead of taking this slap, to him, and they thought Guy Philippe was in the car and they were trying to assassinate him, they say. In any case, these five guys, instead of saying to the people, okay, storm the Bastille, this is it. Look what they did. They ambushed and machine gunned these guys. He went back to Jeremy in the south. And that was kind of the end of the story. That was, and so people kind of got a little disillusioned with Guy Philippe and disappointed, etc. So basically, then you have the month of February, and Cherizier is sort of, watching this all, and he's got his own plans. And then when Ariel goes out to go to Kenya to sign a totally phony baloney memo of understanding, MOU, with the Kenyans, which is a violation of Kenyan law, of Haitian law, and international law, they said, okay, let's mobilize now. And he's out. So let's keep him out. It's easier to keep him out than get him out. So let's keep him out. So they started, he flew over there on February 27th. And on February 29th, they started their assault. They started on police stations, burning some government buildings, and it's just been going methodically since then.
Can you
And
talk a little bit about the prison break too?
Yeah, well, the prison break, this was part of the operation. Now, apparently, it seems that the government even paid some of the gangs to do a breakout of some of the witnesses or people who could be witnesses in the assassination of Jovenel Moise.
Oh, wow.
Okay, isn't this interesting? And so apparently some people, maybe Ariel in the government, said, listen, we got these three guys, a guy called Dimitri Erard and Laguel Civil, who were in charge of the presidential guard, and a guy called Felix Joseph Badiou, who was the guy who told the Colombians to machine gun Jovenel. They described him on the phone. He said, yeah, that's the guy, kill him. And they did. So they wanted these guys to escape. Now, apparently what the gangs did, and this is typical of their approach, they took the money, but they didn't just break out those guys. They broke out everybody, like 4,000 people, because a lot of them were their people. And so that's a lot of the story behind the prison break. I mean, not only do they need soldiers, they need people for what they're doing, but 90% of the people in the jail are untried. They're uncharged even, so most of these people will spend a decade or more in jail with nothing, just on the basis some cop picked them up because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time or dressed wrong. So that's the story behind that, very complex, very nuanced, but but of course the press tried to run with it. Oh, look, they're releasing all the bad elements, all the criminals, etc. Yes, to some extent it's true. There were bad people in there. There were kidnappers in there. There were people who had been convicted, but a lot of people were just poor victims who didn't have enough money to get out, couldn't, never see a judge. So
this
there you go.
reminds me of a little bit of Bane when he says storm, blockade, prison, and free.
Yeah.
But continue.
Yeah. So in any case, the revolution is underway now, and we'll see. It's very fraught.
Can you explain what they're doing with how they blockaded the airport, like how they made it impossible for Henri to land?
Well, it didn't take much. They just shot a plane on February 29th, or maybe it was March 1st. It was, in fact, a Canadian charter plane which flies to Cuba, which got a bullet, in the fuselage or in the window. It wasn't a major thing, but it was enough for all the planes to say, oh, man, we don't want to get near there.
Okay.
That was one. And the airport is kind of near gang territory. And then in the north in Cape Haitian is the only other area where you could land a plane. And the strong politician up there, a guy called Moïse Jean Charles, formerly with the Lavalas family party, now with his own party called Petit Dessalines, Dessalines' children. He's in a block, he's in a alliance with Guy Philippe. So it's Moïse Jean-Charles and Guy Philippe, who are opposite ends of the political spectrum traditionally, but are now working together. So he mobilized his people. He's very strong in the north to basically occupy the airport and make sure no plane could land there. So basically, between the population and the Vivre Ensemble coalition, they were able to prevent any landing of Ariel Henry. Now, there was a plan hatched, discussed when Ariel Henry flew back from Kenya to New York to fly him to Dominican Republic and then bring him into Haiti in a helicopter. But somebody somewhere decided to nix that plan. And when his plane was flying down to Haiti on, what was it, the 4th or 5th of March, it had to circle for a number of times off the coast of Dominican airspace and then divert to Puerto Rico, where he still is.
That makes
Or
sense.
maybe he's in Jamaica now. I forget. Yeah.
Well, he resigned yesterday from
Yeah.
somewhere, but he resigned in the middle of the night, like almost like he was.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, it was at the end of the day. They'd done all their negotiations. No, the US is totally behind the curve on this. You know, they're flailing about. I mean, Blinken is such a
He's such a blithering idiot.
such an idiot. Blithering Blinken, blinky Blinken. No, he's going to go down as one of. But anyway, yeah, they're just totally screwing up everything.
Okay,
Luckily.
so now, so let's assume that the U.S. installs the fake coalition from Jamaica. What is going to happen on the ground in Haiti? Like, what kind of meaning? What does that mean for Haiti on the ground?
I have no idea. I don't know how they're going to bring them in, where they're going to put them. Anybody agrees to this. And unfortunately, like Moïse Jean-Charles, as well as Guy Philippe's, as well as the Famille Lavalas party and others are involved in this. I think all these are going to be rejected by the people because anything, the Haitian people are very politically astute and they can see exactly what the US is doing, especially as you open this program with the condition that you can only be sitting at the table if you agree that we're going to intervene and run the show. So anybody who agreed to that is basically considered a traitor, in the words of my colleague or friend in the struggle, Dr. Jemima Pierre. She said, "Yeah, all these people who signed on to this are traitors." And I think the Haitian people are going to see it similarly. They're going to say this has disqualified them from any trust. And so I think, I don't know what they're going to do. Will it be a provisional government set up by, some sort of local process in Port-au-Prince or the country? I'm not sure how the Vivre Ensemble group is going to move forward, but right now it's an extremely fluid situation.
Okay, I have one more question. In your
Yeah.
movie, you show that Jimmy Cherizier in Port-au-Prince, and it seems like he has a lot of support among the very poor in Port-au-Prince. Does he have any popular support outside of Port-au-Prince?
Yes, I mean, I'm here in New York. I live in the Haitian community here in New York, and a lot of people are, very enthusiastic supporters of him. They like what he's doing. I mean, you're going up against a total disinformation barrage.
Oh, yeah.
Our film is like, one. It's like a movie, where you have the one chariot going into the hordes of the enemy,
Yeah.
and so that's how we feel sometimes because people have not clamored to it, but it's getting viewed now. It's getting seen now, and people are calling me that used to say, "What? You're supporting Jimmy Cherizier?" And now they're saying, "Oh, I see. You were right. Okay, I get it. I see what's happening." Because there's very much a feeling of the ends justify the means at this moment, because Ariel's been gotten out. Jimmy Cherizier and his movement more or less succeeded in ousting Ariel, and so people are saying, "Wow, you did a victory. You pulled it off." But this is where the hard part really comes now. You got to build stuff, and people are going to go through a lot of hell. The water is hard to get, food is hard to get, airport shut, there's going to be, and this is just the beginning.
Yeah,
They're
and
going to
then
put
there'll be the
sanctions,
sanctions.
and everything. So, you have to wonder, you know, is the uh, doctor who's delivering the baby being going to be blamed for the blood that's all everywhere. So that's the problem they're facing at this point. It's going to be a very messy period here, and those initial days in every revolution are the most vulnerable. Look at the Cuban Revolution or Chinese or Russian, and a lot of the time they just squeaked by the skin of their teeth.
Yep. You're absolutely right. Actually, I'm writing my book about the Russian Revolution, and right now I'm in Russia.
During that
Yeah.
period where they're running back and forth with the armies on all sides.
Yeah, no. The funniest part is that like everything they did was like MacGyvering it during the first few months. Literally, they didn't know what to do. And then
Yeah.
they like everyone kind of, and they were lucky to scrape by in those first few months. But you're right.
Yeah.
So what made you interested in Haiti to be like even be part of the English language editor of Haiti Liberté?
Well, I was sort of brought up in the Haitian community. You wouldn't know it by my waspy appearances, but yeah, my mom more or less took up with Haiti's foremost communist revolutionary when I was a
Ooh.
kid. And so I was raised in a household with revolutionaries sitting around the table, discussing their next operation against Duvalier. And eventually, when I graduated high school, I was recruited in. I didn't know it was going to be my entire life. I thought it was maybe just a year or two of duty, but one thing led to another. And the first film that I ever made was made in that period. It came out in 1983, called Bitter Cane, just recently remastered by Indie Collect. Shout out to Indie
Ooh.
Collect, who have taken that old 16 millimeter film, which I think you'd like very much, Sasha. I'll send you a copy of the
Please do.
soon to be released. But it won second prize at Cannes in
Wow.
1983, and was the toast of the town for a while. But so that began in that same year, 1983, was the beginning of Haiti Progrès newspaper, which became, as one journalist once said to me, Haiti Progrès made Aristide. So, as JFK Jr. used to say, you want to change the world, start a newspaper. Well, in the case of Haiti Progrès, that had some truth. And in Haiti Liberté, we're hoping that it will also be truth.
That's great. So what are you working on next? What projects?
Right now, Dan Cohen and I are about to release what will be the effectively episode 5 of Another Vision. Episode 4 is a thing called Special Report on Haiti, which was when Dan was a correspondent at Redacted. You can find that on the Redacted channel, Special Report on Haiti. That came out in November 9th or 10th, I think, of 2022. And so this will be that we could call episode 4 effectively, and this will be episode 5, which is going to be the report after we took a trip last August, which was kind of the beginning of the Vive Ensemble project, and then one in February, which was the penultimate days before this uprising. So I think it'll be pretty interesting, and we're about to drop today a long interview between Jimmy Cherizier and, Esha, in Another Vision, the guy with the kind of blue wall behind him who
Yeah.
says, Jimmy Cherizier is the devil incarnate and is the worst enemy of everybody in the world.
Yeah.
Well, it's a sit down discussion between him and Cherizier sitting together, saying we're going to work together to lift our country out of this. So
Wow. I'm
it'll be
impressed by Jimmy Sherry's ability to make deals. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, that's really amazing.
Yeah. Well, anyway, you'll see this later today, maybe. I'll make sure Dan shoots you a copy of it.
Please do. Thank you so much. And thank you very much for your time, especially I can see you're very busy because you have interviews in Algeria and RT for coming and explaining to our audience the truth about Haiti. Like last week when we mentioned this, we got some like mixed reports, but like I said, after I saw your movie, I was not at all confused anymore. Everything seemed clear.
Well, thanks, Esha, and really thank you for taking the initiative to reach out. And I mean, I'm just learning of your efforts and background, but yeah, you seem to be doing a good job as well.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the evening.
Okay, you too.